This video is going to be kind of awkward for me to make because it's about my experience with postpartum depression. It could have been postpartum psychosis. It could have been a little of both. I experienced it twice, not once, but twice with a 5-year break between the two times. I've been doing just, kind of a surfacey research on the differences between postpartum psychosis and postpartum depression. Um, Postpartum psychosis has delusions or strange beliefs, which I had, hallucinations, feeling irritated, hyperactivity, none of that I had. Decreased ability to sleep, decreased or need or inability to sleep. Believe me, I didn't have that. Sleep has always been my escape. Paranoia or suspiciousness. Let me tell you, I had that. Another thing is rapid mood swings. That's another symptom of postpartum psychosis. I might have had a little bit of mood swings, but I think the delusions and strange beliefs and paranoia and suspiciousness was my deal in the postpartum psychosis. And then there's difficulty communicating at times. I don't think I had that. Although I was so in it that I probably wasn't communicating effectively like I should have been. Now, postpartum depression has mood swings as well. Mood swings and crying spells, which I had, definitely. Anxiety, I definitely had. Again, it has here difficulty sleeping. I didn't have that. Reduced concentration, didn't have that. But I did have sadness. I did have overwhelm. And those are two postpartum depression things. I did not have appetite problems. And I might have had a little bit of irritability. So basically, the postpartum psychosis I had was delusions or strange beliefs, paranoia or suspiciousness. And then postpartum depression, I had crying spells and anxiety, sadness, overwhelm. I'll give you the specifics, okay? The first time I gave birth, the first time has a lot of anxiety in it anyway. You're a first-time parent. I hadn't planned for years to be a parent. I was actually saying, oh, I don't want kids, But I ended up with a child, and I was happy to have her. And, but I was acting a little weird after her birth. Like, I would have to insist, I would have to be the only one to feed her. And the breastfeeding didn't work. And I felt a great amount of guilt about that. So I had to feed her all her bottles. If her dad did, I felt like something was being taken away from me, or I was somehow disappearing. Literally disappearing if someone else was doing something having to do with the baby. I had to do it all. And my baby daddy was the type of person that wanted to be involved. And that's a blessing, Normally I would think that. But I remember him saying, I feel I'm being put out and shut out. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was putting him out, shutting him out. I was extremely possessive over the baby. I was extremely fearful. I would not let my mom carry her for a very long period of time. because I had this irrational fear that my mom was going to fall with the baby. Now, my mom, had previous falls, I think a couple of them. And my nightmare was that she would be holding my child and somehow trip and fall. I didn't trust her. I didn't trust her at all. And it was very extreme. And it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Um, I went to a GP who put me on Lexapro, I believe. And I think the Lexapro helped. I wasn't as needy and grasping and paranoid. I remember being at the kitchen table and my baby daddy, I don't know if he'd want me to say his name, but my baby daddy was holding my child, our child. And I just remember being at the kitchen table and just bawling. I felt like I was just losing it, just bawling. I remember him standing there holding her, looking at me like, what is wrong with her? It's a whirlwind of hormones. And I was dealing with them the best I could. I was about 35. I was 35 at the time. Didn't know much about postpartum depression, but the doctor had warned me and said, if you feel like doing harm to your child, please call us. That's kind of what I thought postpartum depression was, where you felt like doing something to your kid. That wasn't happening. I was shutting everybody else out and clinging to my child for dear life. It was very fearful, very, I wish I could have enjoyed those first, and I did enjoy my first child when she first came tremendously. There were a lot of great times. But those first, I don't know how long it lasted, but I know when the Lexapro kicked in, I wasn't quite as crazy. But it still wasn't diagnosed as postpartum depression or psychosis. It was just like, oh, you're feeling a little depressed. Okay, here's some Lexapro. And that kind of was, a Band-Aid. Until the next time. The next time was 5 years later. I had my second girl. This time the postpartum depression took a very strange turn in the thinking that is involved. The twisted thinking is really scary. I had my second child. Go back a little bit. I wanted my first child to have a sister or brother. I wanted this for her. Okay, I thought it would be cool. I felt I had a second one in me. Okay, I came from that open place. But I'll tell you something, by the time I was giving birth to that second child, something changed. And suddenly I felt threatened by my first child, thinking my first child was going to hurt my second child somehow. I thought my first child was going to try to take over mothering my second child. And that she was going to somehow hurt her somehow. Granted, my first child was just 5 years old in kindergarten. So I think a 5-year-old is going to take over mothering my second kid. I think a 5-year-old who showed no signs of evil or being a psychopath or sociopath or anything like that. Suddenly, I think she's going to either accidentally I don't know if I felt she would do something on purpose. Not really, but it was a feeling anyway that was very intense. And it lasted for a long time. It lasted a long time. I think it lasted longer than the first one, than the first craziness. Looking back now as a sane, fairly sane person who sees a psychiatrist, there's no shame in that. I do take medication for depression, anxiety, so I think I had a predisposition for it anyway. But looking back, feeling sane now and looking back on this, it's absolutely ridiculous. I was undiagnosed and barely treated. I think I was being John Wayne and trying to just handle it all on my own. I think, here's the deal. I read this today. It's not a character flaw or a weakness to have postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis. It's not a character flaw or a weakness. I probably thought it was at the time. So I John Wayne'd it and tried to just handle it myself instead of getting some serious help. Looking back now, I needed to be diagnosed and I needed to be honest about my thoughts, which I was very ashamed of at the time. It carried with it a lot of shame. I blamed myself, and it took years from me, and it affected my family. It affected my family, and it probably the remnants of it are still there today. I have a great relationship with both my daughters. Okay, now they're great kids. They're close. They have their, spats every once in a while, and the teenage one wants the other one to get away, and then other times she wants to, cuddle or whatever. But I don't freak out over every little thing now. I was undiagnosed, barely treated with anything, blamed myself, took years. So the reason I'm making this video right now is for women and men who have a new baby in the house. If you're feeling at all freaky in the head, don't blame yourself. You're not a bad person. If you have any thoughts that are anything like mine, or anything that you weren't normally feeling like 9 months prior, and particularly if you want to, harm your child, please get help. But even if I never had that form of it, but if you feel freaky, call a doctor. There's no shame in it. Nip it in the bud. I didn't do that. And I'm surrounded by smart people, and I know nurses, and I think I just acted out my emotions instead of talking about them. And they were not rational. And I look back now and think, okay, yeah, this was postpartum twice in my life. And I wonder sometimes how I got kind of distracted in life. I don't regret having children. I love my kids. But I think when you have kids, of course, it's a big distraction and it's a big deal. But when you have postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, or a combination, that can derail you for a while. And it did me. And all I could hope for is that someone who sees this video today, who is pregnant or has just had a baby and feels like weird thoughts and anxieties and paranoias, and looking at people as threats that normally aren't threatening, Big red flags. Pick up a phone, have someone else pick up a phone, make an appointment with a psychiatrist or at least a doctor, because the doctor that handled your pregnancy would be the perfect person. That's what I needed to do, and I didn't do. Never once did I go to my the doctor that handled my first child and go, I don't want my baby's daddy to feed her except me. I don't want the. It was crazy. And I think it robbed me of a certain amount of joy in those beginning months the first time. I did have a lot of joy, but I think I didn't need all that other crap of, being so possessive. And this very same kid that I was so possessive of and had to do everything for was the same kid that I looked at 5 years later and went, "You're going to hurt the other kid." It's great. Is that crazy or what? It wasn't me. It's not me now. It wasn't me then, but it was the hormones and whatever the heck goes on with women when they have kids. Brooke Shields wrote a book on postpartum depression, her experience with it, which was very well known. I think she had the kind where she didn't want anything to do with her kid, kind of thing. I haven't read that book, but it would be an interesting read. It'll be on my list of 10 books that I have to read right now. But she believes in medicine, and she got treatment for what happened, and part of it was medication. That's why Tom Cruise was so upset with her. But that's a whole other video, right? I think that's it. My plea to men and women, like I said in the beginning of the video, any weirdness after you have a baby, pick up that phone. Call for help. There's no shame. It's not a character flaw. You're doing yourself and your kids a favor. Jen's out. Peace. Like and subscribe to my damn channel. Love you. Have a great day. Adios.